So to make progress with your band, you've got to have a plan. And what we're talking about is a plan to get you from A to B. And that's kind of up to you, but like, I think most people that we're talking to are interested in going from a kind of local level, you know, being local heroes, to perhaps competing at national level. And I mean things like decent supports and festivals and a bigger kind of audience. So perhaps you could, if you could tour around the whole of the UK and reach 100 people a night in all those little venues, that'd be magic. So without this plan, you're just left with a pipe dream, and the problem with that is you're leaving everything to chance, and this is too important to do that. So, you know, the point of this lecture is really to give you the skills and the knowledge very quickly in 30 minutes to put some steps, some sort of achievements and goals along the way, so that over 12 months you can go from A to B. And of course now there's no barriers whatsoever between you and your audience. You can reach that audience. So by definition, you're already in the music business. There's no gatekeepers to being in that kind of special club like there used to be. The A&R men in the labels that may or may not sign you, or the Simon Cowells on the TV show. It's all gone, and it's all there. So we're already in the club. And how far you get is entirely determined by you and how good your band is. So I suppose, what is it? It's if you take responsibility for yourself, yes or no, that's a yes or no question. If you do, tick. How good the band is and how well you understand your audience, which is kind of the same thing. And then how hard you work and how sensible your plan is. So those three or four things are kind of what makes it all work, you know. So it's down to you. So what we're going to do today is just give you the information to make this plan in a sensible way. Simple as that. Okay, so this is just the way I look at the music business. I tend to look at things in a visual way, and as you notice, I like to draw pictures, you know. And you might look at it differently. You also might see the music business a little bit differently. So in the comments, I'm quite happy to be disagreed with and have a debate, you know. It's not like the people in the WaterBear Broadcast know all the answers. You know, we're just here to share knowledge. But I tend to think of it like this. It's like a universe or a solar system with the artist. I always like to think of the artist in the middle. So let's have a singer-songwriter. Here it is, or she. Okay, so there's the artist. Now the reason I put the artist in the middle of the solar system is everything kind of revolves around them. And the artist, I'd make a point here that it's not simply someone that can sing and play well and write songs, because that's craft. So what's the difference between sounding good and actually being an artist? What's the difference between craft and art? And in my view, arguably, you can disagree with me and debate this, but I think an artist, more than anything else, stands for an audience and speaks for them. And that's for the audience to decide. We don't really get to decide that. We do our thing, and if people like it and identify with it and feel some kind of emotional response to it, then we've done our job. So the artist has to have a vision, I think, a vision for that. And that, more than anything else, that's their role, to speak for the audience. So next to the artist, in the solar system and orbiting round, I've got the manager. And the reason I put the manager next to the artist is that these guys work together as a real solid team in an ideal world. Doesn't always happen, but ideally the aims and objectives of the artist, it's the manager's job to coordinate everything else in the solar system of the music business and make sure stuff happens and we're on track to go from A to B. So they help realise the goals of the artist. Okay, so we could probably argue about what else to add to this team. Imagine this is a band and we're a year in, we've made a really good record, we've made a lot of progress between the two of us, and it's time to step things up a bit on that role from A to B, from local band to national band. And what a lot of bands do is they employ a PR person or a PR company. Now, The trouble with this is, I've seen it countless times over the last few years, that bands see this as the be-all and the end-all. They think if they throw a little bit of money here, the band will step up. And the PR company can only work with the stories that you're giving them. And if the story's a bit weak and it's just a band releases another album, there's not a lot they can do with it. Unfortunately, some PR companies would be quite happy to take a couple of grand off a young band and know that the chances of them getting any press at all are very slim. So you've got to be very, very careful and know that you're going to, well, work with someone trusted for a start. So at the end of this lecture, there'll be an email address where we will give you contacts for some great PR companies, managers that we really like, and also some sources of funding for bands as well. So it's designed to give you some contacts to get you going for this kind of early stage. So a PR's job is really traditionally to get you some press. That can be internet, it can be low level stuff, because the grassroots stuff is still really exciting. And it could be the front cover of Kerrang, it could be tabloid newspapers. I've seen small bands get into the tabloids just because they happen to play a great set at a festival. It happened to Massive Wagons on the Rising stage, for example. They were reviewed in The Sun, I think it was. So, you know, this is an amazing component part of what we're doing. It can really help what we've got going on here, bring it to more people. And you don't have to pay for this all the time. It could just be part of a campaign. So next to our PR professional here that we've hired in, perhaps we've hired them in for 3 months over a record campaign, we might bring a radio plugger. So that's someone who takes your record to radio, and radio is no different to press in that you don't just need a great track, you usually need a bit of a story and a bit of an awareness around the band. And you can get a specialist plugger that does regional radio, regional rock radio. You can have a plugger that does Planet Rock, Radio 1, Radio 2, you know, so it's usually quite easy to find out who they are, and you just ring them up and say, how much does it cost? Could you work this record? And what do you think realistically the chances are of getting my record on the radio? And all these good pluggers, all the people that we work with, they're honourable, great people, and if they think it's too early, they'll tell you that. And you can plan again for the next release, perhaps in 6 months or a year's time. And I suppose in this area of growing your audience, alongside the work you're doing live, we've got to talk about social media. And you could farm this out. You know, you could pay someone 200 or 300 quid a month to do this for you, and then plenty of people will do that. But my good friend Damien Keys, who specialises in social media, he's always saying that social media is never the same if it's not coming from the artist. If it hasn't got that direct, honest connection to the artist and it's filtered through someone else, however good they are, it's rarely as satisfying. And when we're comparing our smaller growing artist at grassroots level to a huge star, like Dave Grohl for example, one area that we can win is that we can be fast, we can be responsive, we don't have to ask anyone's permission to press that button and post about something or share a piece of music. So that is our number one advantage. So I agree with him. I recommend that the artist, even though it's a lot of work, that the artist take care of the social media in conjunction with a PR person and a radio plugger, potentially. So we're going to talk about publishing next. And it's important to understand that a publisher deals with maximising the commercial potential to the royalties that are attached to the actual song itself. The record company owns the audio, the masters, but even the record company has to pay the manufacturer records a royalty back to the publisher. So think of it like this: songs, audio, masters. And the reason it's separate is the publishing industry predates the recorded music industry, because there was published music, i.e. sheet music, on sale before records. So that industry was already established. So today, if you haven't got a publishing deal, then you are self-published and you would collect your own royalties, and that's perfectly possible to do. It gets a little bit complicated when you're trying to collect royalties from other countries. And at that point and before, there's a good argument to signing a publishing deal. A publisher does two things. They collect your royalties for you, saving you a bit of time and effort, and they do that in lots of different countries. And for that, they obviously take a percentage, which you negotiate, and you can see that in your publishing contract. How much are they going to take for what they've done, collecting your royalties? There's lots of different types of royalties, but the main ones are the royalties that come from PRS, the Performing Rights Society. So you'll get royalties for TV, radio, public performance. So when you do a big gig, if you were to play at Download, for example, you would fill in a PRS statement, and you'd list all your songs, which you would have previously registered with the PRS when you released your album. They'd go, aha, they've played that particular song. It's a royalty is attached depending on the size of the crowd. So if you're ever doing a big festival, that's why you really need to fill your PRS form in, because it could be thousands of pounds, potentially tens of thousands of pounds. I've got some good friends in a band called the Temperance Movement. They were on tour with the Stones. The PRS from the live performances was absolutely enormous, which is great. So PRS, radio, live, TV, that sort of thing. There's another type of royalty called mechanicals, which seems to be falling out of fashion somewhat, just because of the way the economics of making records go these days. There's less margin, and sometimes people forget or don't pay mechanicals at all. But essentially, when someone presses a CD or a record or a download, some of that money, the mechanical royalty, should go to the songwriter via the publishing company. And as well as collecting these royalties in the UK and abroad, if that's appropriate, the other main job of the publisher is to kind of maximise the commercial potential of the song. So that, in theory, is things like taking your song and placing it on an advert, placing it in a film, or some other area that it can gain a royalty. Computer games is more and more common, of course. And in reality, some publishers are very good at that, and some of them are very content just to sit there, have an easy life and collect the royalties. So let's remind ourselves, we've got our artist, we've got our manager, artist or band manager. We've got PR, radio, socials going on. And we've thought about publishing. Okay, so we're getting pretty sorted. So, and you know, the band's going quite well at this stage. Maybe we're at the stage now already where we're playing to 100 people all dotted around the UK and Ireland and Scotland, and it's like, it's starting to really happen. Is it time to do a record deal? I wonder. I'm going to put the record label here, represented by one person, but it could be a small indie, it could even be a major, it could be a large indie. So that's the label. So what is a record company and what do they do? Well, the way I think of it is it's fundamentally just a way of raising funds. Now, a record company may have some expertise inside it, so it may have a PR company, it may have a social media department, it may have an A&R department, etc. Or they may just do what you could do and hire it in anyway. A lot of indies have a fairly small skeleton staff and they hire in a bit of PR when it's needed. You know, so, and there's nothing to stop you hiring in any type of expertise these days. It's a very fluid and flexible workforce out there, and a lot of the costs involved are much cheaper if you do it directly. Because if you're hiring in a PR company through your record company to work on your project, there's our artist, it's going to cost you a bit more. It always does. The more links in the chain, the less there is at the end of it for the artist. So we could sign a record deal. We may get offered a record deal. We may not. We may not have the choice anyway. We may be faced with being a self-reliant, independent artist. Just by the way it goes. We might not have chosen that, but that might be the way that's available to us. Or we might have options. If you start happening, chances are someone will knock on your door and want to give you a record deal. It's up to you whether you take it. Typical advance these days is much smaller. So if you get a medium-sized indie label offering you £15,000 to run a band, that £15,000 might be something you could raise by an alternative method. And the one thing to bear in mind with a record company is 99 times out of 100 they're going to own the masters in perpetuity forever, even if you've borrowed the money, made your record, sold a load, paid it back, thank you very much, you've recouped, you've paid your debt back to the record company. Under the terms of the contract, they'll probably keep hold of the ownership of the masters. All the old Little Angels records, those audio recordings are owned by Polydor. I couldn't put out a best of Little Angels without speaking to the label and organising some kind of license. So what are we going to do if we don't want to sign a record deal? We want to remain independent. We want to keep that kind of creative independence as well and make our own decisions. And we don't want to compromise on that. And we kind of think, well, 15,000 quid to make a record. Could we raise it another way, or more money, or how can we do it? How else can we raise funds apart from a traditional label? Well, of course, the answer is obvious. It's things like crowdfunding. So I'll put funding over here. So I think most of us know how Pledge works, but for those of you who don't, it's amazing. I had a great experience with Pledge with Colour of Noise. Did one album with them. The Pledge community of subscribers who are all interested in new music, there's now 3 million of those people. So Pledge tend to tell new artists that you'll get an extra 30-40% of sales by being on that platform. I found that to be exactly the case. Pledge are very good on rock. I don't know why I think they've got some really good rock people on their team. They seem to know how to deal with it. Another advantage of Pledge, and I'm not a salesman for Pledge, just my experience was it was very good. Colour of Noise, new band, we were on the front page with Megadeth, I think it was, and Dweezil Zappa. So we were already in good company when we started out with a new band, and I think the vibe was good. Pledge take 15% of anything they generate, which I think is fair because they work very hard, and the campaign worked for us. But it's not the only avenue for funding. There's other crowdfunding platforms, and you might not be aware there are various grants, loans and incentives for new bands to get out there and do it. And if you send us an email to the address below, we'll just send you a link to a few that we've found. All right, so what about gigs in all this? Because for most of us that are doing music that's sort of live and based on performance, that's kind of powering this whole curve as well. And it's driving everything, because we sell records because people have seen us live. We've got an audience because usually it's on stage where people come across us first, So at every level, at every single level, right the way up to perhaps the very top, the headliners, there's a shortage of gigs for most bands. So most bands are scratching their heads going, why can't I get on the festival stage? Why can't I get a decent support slot? What's going on? Well, it's not just you, it's all of us. Colour of Noise, just exactly the same situation. Now, Colour of Noise, we had a live agent. So the live agent, their job is to book a tour and negotiate those gig fees for you. So our live agent was X-Ray, Steve Strange, who is the biggest agent in rock. Now Steve is an amazing guy, and I didn't realise how tough it was, because I'd made a record for 20 years, first record was Little Angels, came back into the scene, and I was like, well, we'll just go and do a few gigs. And Steve, looking back now, what he did for us was incredible. He got us on download, Andy Coppin as well, largely because of the history, and we pulled as many strings as we could, like you do. Got on download. I didn't realise what a miracle that was at the time. It was an amazing show. We then went on tour with the Dead Daisies, we went on tour with Thunder, and we went on tour with Toesland. So very, very quickly, we did a lot of stuff, and then suddenly couldn't get arrested. And we also did Steelhouse, all sorts of stuff. Couldn't get arrested, couldn't get a gig, and it was just that we were in the same boat as loads of other bands at the same level. And whenever there's a tour, be it, I don't know, be it the Dead Daisies or be it the Scorpions or whatever it is, or Stone Broken, there'll be millions of bands going in for that support. You know, and none of us in bands realise how many bands are going in and how hard the competition is. And we've only realised that through running the Rising stage. So, booking agents, they coordinate your national and international touring and live work. That's their job. But they've got their work cut out. And again, they can't work miracles. So you've got to give these guys a break and do everything in your power to make their job easier. Because as a new band, you're not making anyone any money. They're working really hard to pull something out of the bag for you, and you've just got to say thank the Lord if you get something, and work out ways of booking your own gigs, doing headline swaps. You know, if you haven't got a booking agent, just do it yourself. Learn how to do it. Learn where the venues are, book your own gigs. If you've got an audience, put them in, get on with it. And at that point, when you do sign to a booking agent, you'll hop on to the next level and start to do these tours. And you know, think of it from the band's point of view. What makes a great support act? Well, it's someone who takes the pressure off and sells a few tickets. If they're nice people and they help the tour vibe, that's fantastic as well. And that's what touring's about, really. So alongside the booking agent, you've got the promoter. Promoters can work at a local or national level, but for this purposes of this discussion, let's think of the local promoters. So the booking agent has put the tour together, hopefully routed it in a sensible way, if that's possible, so you're going in around the UK like that rather than like this, you know. And then the local promoter's job is to sell the tickets. And again, there's nothing to stop you coming on board with that, reaching your fan base through social media and targeting particular towns. If you're playing in Bristol, put some effort in. Don't just leave it to these guys. And you might not have the option of using these guys, you might have to do it all yourself anyway. So you're gradually getting a little bit of expertise in all these areas. What else have we got to think about? So, big income stream is merch. So again, you can do it yourself, or you can do it, if you're a slightly bigger band, you can do a deal with a merch company. The merch deals that I've done in the past tended to be the band get an advance, if they're a big enough band to warrant that, and you get paid 25% of the gross on the t-shirt sale, so you get £2.50 if it's sold for 10 quid. If you do it yourself, obviously your margins can be higher, so we'll put merch over here. But for many of us at the level we're at, the grassroots kind of rock level, you can tour and do a support tour and break even if your merch is good and the band's good, just by selling. I'll do a t-shirt on this dude. By selling your t-shirts, you can pay for a tour, or just about. And the way to see how your band's doing and how it's going down is people talk about cost per merch per head. So if you've done a support tour and it's going pretty well, you might do £1 a head. If it's going absolutely amazingly and you do £4 a head, that's a real success. You know, so if you've got 500 people in a venue and you do £2 a head, that's £1,000 every night, gross. So it's not to be sneezed at. Special mention to another type of funding, which is sponsorship. And you might be able to get some help with your tour costs. You might be playing on a festival stage which is sponsored by someone like Laney. Tama and Ibanez, they sponsored the Rising stage for a couple of years and did an amazing job getting that stage going. You'll notice Cloven Hoof, Rum appearing in a very, very cool way at grassroots level, doing an awful lot to keep this scene moving. So let's all raise a glass to them. So sponsorship, it could be also free guitars, or at least cheaper guitars and cheaper strings. You know, when you go through a set of strings every night, if you can get a deal with Rotor Sound or whatever it is, that's a good thing. And also, all these sponsorship deals not only bring in little bits of cash or help the tour budget, but they also spread the word on social media. Again, Laney and Ibanez, Tama, they signed Dirty Thrills as an endorsed artist off the back of the Rising stage, and I presume the lads got some amazing gear out of it, but also the reach was increased enormously, so that's very cool. Of course, we could keep going a long time with all little bits and pieces, but this is how I fundamentally see the music business. I'm going to stop here with one little mention to one person in the scene who might become your best friend, and that is the tour manager. So I'll put the tour manager over here with the booking agent and the promoter. Now, the tour manager that we work with a lot is Metal Jez Walton, who, funny enough, actually looks like this. Because he's quite skinny because he works really hard. So, but Jez and George Donahue, you'll see running the stages sometimes that we run. If you've got someone you can rely on to coordinate a tour, you know, behind the scenes, Jez and George run and coordinate the underground music conferences that we run, and they do that with Claire Lloyd from Central Press, and that team make it possible for us to go out on the road. Without Jez, without George, without Claire, it's just too much work for one person, and we couldn't do it. So find a great tour manager, someone who can budget, do out front sound or monitors, ideally, drive a bit, plan the route, do the budgeting, and if you get someone like that, look after them like glue, because they deserve to be sainted. There's his little halo and wings. So we're going to do a broadcast like this every week, and the only reason that we're doing it is to help you make the most of your professional career in music. So the thing to do now is to think about where you are right now and where you want to be and how you might fit into all this, and which bits you're going to do yourself and which bits you might get some help with, and think about all those steps. Make sure it's as realistic and achievable as you can make it, and then if you want, send it to us. Send us a video, a little biog, and your plan in a fairly small bullet point form. We'll give you a little bit of feedback. So send that to the email address below. And please subscribe to the channel and press the like button. That'll be great. See you later.